Where in the world are you at the moment, Sarah?
I am in Spain, Mallorca, and it's lovely. It's beautiful. And you're also on an island, it's just a little bigger.
A little bit bigger and a little bit colder because today was the first day of winter here. Are you just escaping the Aussie summer? What are you doing over there?
I have to admit, I'm like, European summer during Aussie winter, and then I'll come back in October and hit the spring, which I love in Sydney. And so I am avoiding the winter.
It's a good tactic. People might not realize that you do spend time in Australia as well.
I am proud to say that I have made Australia my home, which is super exciting. I haven't had a base in almost a decade. All my family is there, and a few of my boxes are there while I travel. But yeah, I do live in Australia.
You do like to move around. Does that suit your working life? Does that give you inspiration for your writing? What's given you the drive to live like that?
I think initially it was a bit of escapism. So if I'm like brutally honest, I think when I first started doing this, like in my early to mid 20s, I think a little bit of that was I couldn't feel like I can exist and truly be myself or really work through shit in the context that I was in at the time. And I just needed a change of scenery, as cliche as that may sound. And then I started to move around. And although it's fun, it also has its difficulties. And it was interesting to be like, okay, when I move around and I change all my context, I change the culture, I change the people I engage with, what is the one consistent thing? And that was me. And it was a really interesting way to figure out who I was in terms of like, when you strip everything away and there's no routine, you really get to see like, I bring this version of myself everywhere. And is this a version of myself that I like or I don't like? And so it ended up being something that I enjoyed and something that really helped me kind of become who I am today. And then it it was a cool way to learn about the world and culture and myself. And I think my love for it kind of grew over time and it became less about escapism. I don't think it's about that at all anymore. And I think it's about just wanting to really experience what it is to be alive and utilizing my time, the time that I've been given, and connecting with people that I would never be able to connect to otherwise. And so it's something that I'm still quite passionate about and hopefully can continue doing for a while. And of course, my work, takes me to the US a lot and Britain a lot. And so my studies take me to Austria. So there are reasons, like practical reasons as to why I travel. And then the rest is just to fill my soul, so to speak.
You touched on your work taking you to the States. It's taking you to Vienna with your studies. You've got so many different projects on at the moment. What would you say is taking up most of your time?
Probably up until a month ago was my book. But I think trying to finish my doctoral dissertation while writing my book was quite the task. And so to be honest, lately, probably for the last year and a half, I've been writing a lot. I write my USA Today column. I wrote my doctoral dissertation, my book, my daily content, my newsletter. So it's just been a lot of creativity, a lot of writing is probably what took the most of my time.
How does a typical day look for you? I know you load up your mornings with writing. Is that generally how it goes?
Wow. Yeah, you didn't. I do. It really depends on my time zone because if I'm seeing clients, like in Australia, I had to start seeing clients at like 6 a.m. because of the time zone. So it really depends. I don't have like a routine that I just travel with. I always have to kind of adapt. But yeah, for me, I always do the hardest task first, the most mentally exhausting tasks first. And so that's usually writing. And then I will usually do, all the tasks you hate but have to. So all the admin, the emails, the whatever, in the afternoons. I'm like playing with things that I do. So I'm trying to do like Mondays are for creative work, Tuesdays are. So I keep switching it up. Sometimes even if a routine works for you, it feels so redundant. And I hate that feeling when you're like, wow, I feel like I'm just living the same day over and over again. And that can happen quite easily. So I'm trying really hard to change settings. Like this coffee shop is for when I do this kind of work. And at home, I do this kind of work and maybe switch things up every couple months just so that I feel like I am not on autopilot because autopilots scare me a bit.
I also find when you're on autopilot, time moves so quickly. the year flies by, and I'm experiencing that at the moment. I'm a creature of habit, and I really rely on routine and structure to be effective. But I kind of need to remind myself that breaking that routine, that's where life is, and that's where the joy of life is. So good on you for being conscious about that. You're studying at the Sigmund Freud University. Never heard of him.
I never heard of the guy.
Never heard of the guy. Tell me about where you're at in that process and what it's like.
So yeah, I am done. I'm actually just waiting for my defense date, which hopefully will be within the next 2 weeks. So that's a crazy thing to say. Yeah, I'm done. Like that's it. I have nothing else to add. This is joy. It's pure joy on my face. I have to wait another 2 weeks before I can call myself a doctor, but I think that's it.
Wonderful. How are you going to celebrate?
That's a really great question. I don't even know what's like. I've been in school. I've been studying psychology. I think I calculated for 14 or 15 years at this point. That's like half my life. And how do you celebrate something like that? Since I was 15 years old, I've wanted to become a doctor. I don't know what feels worthy enough of it, but I'm sure I'll think of something.
I've had a small window into how hard you work, and it's incredibly impressive. So I hope you celebrate with something meaningful, because you deserve it, Sarah.
Aw, thanks, Nick. Actually, I think the biggest gift I'm giving myself this summer is taking some time off and not taking on new projects, and maybe taking like 2-3 months to just do the bare minimum. And I'm super proud of that.
Does that still include writing for Instagram? Because you're so consistent with posting. I think you're posting every day. If you're taking time off, are you going to take time off from your socials as well?
Absolutely not. No, I am not going to do that, but I think I will bulk create.
Let's not be crazy here.
Let's not be wild. My book is coming out in 2 months. I cannot just take 2 months off of social media, but I have to admit, social media doesn't feel like much work in terms of like, I enjoy it. It's something I've done for years now. And it's a way to connect with people as well. And so to me, that's the least of my kind of workload. That's not something that creates stress. And it allows me to kind of stay sharp and creative. And so I will definitely be like on trains and buses and planes, writing on my little napkins ideas. And I think that's gonna remain.
Because what comes through from your Instagram, that it seems very much like they're insights that you're having, and they're coming from a really creative, intrinsic place. It doesn't seem like you're writing for the audience or burdened by the responsibility of having so many followers on Instagram.
Is this a compliment?
I think so. I think there's a compliment in there. But do you ever feel responsible for being the therapist of 1.5 million people?
Great question. No, because I'm not their therapist, and I try to make that very clear. But honestly, I did. I remember when I first hit 5,000 follows, I panicked. I think that was the one time when I genuinely panicked, and I went, okay, this is so much responsibility. Like, these people are reading my words, they're interpreting them, they might do with them whatever, they might feel like it validates their decision, and I have no idea if it's actually validating decision. Like, I just overthought it so much, and it came to a place where it was almost paralyzing of like, what do I write, and do I have the right to write this, and what if it's people misinterpret it, and what if this is not the advice they need to hear. And so I had that breaking point at like 5,000, and then after that, I think I realized that I just needed to trust my audience. I needed to trust the fact that people are responsible for their own lives, and that they can take whatever they need to take from that content and make it clear that this is not me dictating how you should live your life, but just some insights that can inspire your own. And so I think by allowing people to be responsible for themselves, it reduced some of the responsibility that I was feeling. And that's not to say that I don't take it very seriously. I do. But at this point, I can't. You're going to do with it what you will. And there's absolutely nothing I can do about that. And it honestly gets easier as your follower count gets bigger, because at some point you can't conceptualize how many people that is. Like, it becomes so like, I can't imagine, like, that's multiple arenas full of people. And I'm sure if I saw multiple arenas full of people, I'd be like, completely frozen. But I think because it does become a number.
Sarah, it's a lot more than multiple arenas. It's such an abstract figure. It's hard to get your head around. But I think with any level of content creation, and mind you, I don't have 1.5 million followers. At the end of the day, all you can do is create something that's authentic to you, and people are going to receive it at whichever level they're at. You don't have any control over what happens once you hit post. I love all of your posts. I love all of your writing. What sort of themes really light you up?
Responsibility, meaning, all the things you've talked about. I think anything that has to do with our existence, anything that has to do with how you show up in the world. I get so excited to hopefully write something that will get people more curious about who they are, or get them to explore the way they live their lives. That's kind of, it doesn't really matter what the content specifically is, but if I hit a sore spot, or if I hit or I induce an aha moment, that's like what makes me excited.
Do you ever fall into a trap of allowing how the audience going to receive your content shape what you're going to create?
Yes, sometimes. And it's hard, especially with algorithms being wild. I think you'll pick up on things that you know are a safer bet. And I try really hard not to allow that to dictate what I create and what I put out. And sometimes it's like those posts that completely plummet, that just do so poorly, where you'll get really meaningful DMs or comments. And I think that's a really great way to recenter and go, okay, why are you creating it, right? Is it to make sure that each post goes viral, or is it to just ensure you're helping at least one individual out there? And if something feels like it's resonating personally with me, it's on my heart, and I want to share it, I will do it, even if I know, for example, that it won't be one of my top ranking posts. And so it is hard. It's hard not to fall into that trap. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. I think it's only natural to be conscious of the trends and be conscious of what's being received well. And that definitely steers you towards what you're creating. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to create in line with those trends. I guess it's just making sure there's a balance so that you're still creating from the heart and it's still authentic to you. Something I know that's always going to hit with the audience are skits around relationships. And that's actually how we first came into touch, because I put up a skit about dating and you shared that with your audience.
It was so good, Nick.
The dating ones are so funny because there are just so many wonderful mannerisms, for lack of a better term, in the dating scene. Do you find your relationship content generally is received with more attention?
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. But I think that only makes sense. We're relational beings, and most of us are dating, trying to date, married, in the situationship. I think it's for a lot of people, it's part of their daily lives, and so it makes sense that content like that would resonate with almost everyone. Even it's not just romantic relationships, any dynamics, platonic friendships, family relationships. I think that kind of content generally gets a lot more attention.
What do you think presents as the number one dilemma for singles in our modern dating arena?
Oh, jeez. I don't know if there's one. I think that there's three that I can think of. Are you ready? Number one is that I think a lot of people are showing up how they think they should be showing up rather than who they are. And part of that is just societal pressure, or it's kind of like Instagram. We know what content will do better. You also know what kind of pictures and what kind of phrases will probably get you on a date. So it's kind of playing the game rather than really trying to show up as who you are. And that can also be hard if you don't know who that person is. And so I don't think it's always malicious. I just think it's, people having very little idea of, or a very weak relationship with themselves, and then simultaneously trying to build a strong relationship with someone else, which can be difficult. I think that we are starting to treat people like products. So it's is this to my satisfaction? And then you go on a date and you're like, I'd like to return this, please. Yeah, it was not perfect. And I think, our standards they're simultaneously so sad and so low. And then at the same time, about the most ridiculous things, they're incredibly high. So it's like, they don't treat me with respect. That's fine. But they wore a sweater that I really didn't like. So I'm not going to go on a second date. Like, that's kind of the stuff I'm hearing where it's like, we need to switch that up. Like, the bare minimum needs to be there. And then we need to lower the standards of things that are completely inconsequential to the actual relationship. And then the third thing that I think makes dating super hard and dating apps is like the intention. Most people don't know why they're on the dating app. So it's like, do you have a clear intention of like, I want to hook up, I want a relationship, I want to get married, I just want to get to know people, I just want to have a fun, like whatever it is, do you know what your intention is? And then are you clearly communicating that intention? We're so connected, but I still don't think that the clarity and the communication is quite there, despite the fact that most people will text all day long. They're still not actually communicating.
There's so much there, isn't there? This is the thing about dating. It's a minefield. Do you think this unlimited choice dilemma is leading people towards perfectionism?
No, I don't even know if it's perfectionism. I think it's lack of the ability to be content. It's always like the grass is greener. I don't even know. There's so many things that can feed into this, but I think so many people are not looking at like what aligns and what fits with me. They're trying to get the objectively best thing. So it's like, well, okay, he makes X amount of money, but maybe I could date someone who makes more money. Like, and it has nothing to do with like with the lifestyle that I want. And I picked money because that's a weird one. And I think it's a taboo thing to talk about, but for a lot of people, it is a thing that they consider. But it's like, okay, for the lifestyle that you want and want to co-create with this person, maybe this amount is totally fine. But we are looking for like that objective, like, but I want them to make more because that would be easier. And we're like trying to see like, is there something better? Instead of being like, is this good for me? Does this fit for me? Does this make me happy? Does this align? How does this dynamic make me feel? We're going, okay, these things are fine, but is there something better? Like, could they be even better? And I think that's just either being scared to commit or not learning how to be content or not prioritizing the right things.
When people have an unlimited amount of alternatives out there, there's always going to be something better. At some point, we need to compromise. And I'm not suggesting that you need to settle, but we need to be present and happy with what we have and put our attention and our focus into the relationship. How do we know when we've found a person worth investing in?
I don't think you do. I mean, like, you choose to. You go, I want to work on this with you. It's not great, but it's the desire and the commitment to co-create a life, a relationship. And, you can have signs where it's like the way that they make you feel, the way that they support you, the fact that their words and their actions align, the fact that they communicate great, the fact that like you have a lot in common, that your values align, like all these things can be great. But I think at some point you just need to go, I am willing to tolerate all the things I don't like about this person, because they're obviously going to be things you don't like about someone. And that in relationships, there are things you're going to have to tolerate for the rest of your life. And it's like choosing that this person and this thing you're tolerating is worth it. And then it's just your commitment to the cause. I mean, that's not a sexy answer, but I think at some point that's what it becomes. It's like you understand after your infatuation phase that they are human and you're not perfect. And it's just like, we are committed to making this work because we value each other so much. And, because we have the skills to engage on this, journey together. But I don't know if it's like, and then I had a dream and I woke up and, like I have butterflies all the time. And maybe that's some people's, experience, but the whole, if sure, it might be a feeling, but it also is just commitment.
In my history of relationships, whenever I've found that I'm entering a period of doubt, as taboo as that it might be, or if I'm having any internal struggles about the relationship, if I've gone inward and found areas where I can improve, and then I put attention and focus and intentionality into the relationship, 100% of the time 90% of the time has mirrored back to me a more loving and committed relationship. One trend on social media at the moment is people obsessing over red flags. And there are our less talked about friends, the green flags. Now, talk to me about green flags and why they're important as well.
I guess green flags are behaviors that you notice that you think are going to nurture a healthy connection, behaviors that you think will make this person a good partner. Honesty, follow through, having words and actions aligned. It's, picking up on behaviors that you believe will make them a good partner, a good friend.
And it goes back to commitment and compromising on the perceived negatives that might be in a relationship. No relationship is ever going to be perfect. And if we obsess over those red flags, we're doing ourselves a massive disservice. Another question I have is around ghosting. So I've been ghosted before. It sucks. I'm sure I've probably ghosted as well. Why do people ghost, and what's a better alternative?
People can ghost for several reasons. One is discomfort of confrontation. Another reason is that they're scared of hurting someone, which is ironic because they usually end up hurting them more by ghosting. Some people really struggle to articulate or share their feelings with others. I think when most people think of ghosting, they think, oh, you just couldn't be bothered. And I'm sure to an extent that that's true. But I do feel that a lot of people who ghost lack self-awareness and lack communication skills. And so this has just become a socially acceptable way to treat others, kind of like a way out, that now a lot of people who struggle with communication and self-awareness have chosen. A better alternative, unless it's obviously a situation where you don't feel safe and don't want to have any further communication, but obviously is just being honest. You don't have to be rude. You don't need to send like a whole list of reasons as to why you don't want to see them again or how they gave you the ick during the date. Like it's not about being like, you wore this, you said this, but it's just saying, hey, I don't really feel like this is going anywhere. It was so lovely to meet you. And just making it clear that you're ending things. And I think the longer the relationship, the connection lasted, the more you owe the person an explanation. Obviously, if it was one date, maybe you don't. So I think context also matters.
When you ghost people, you're dragging them along. You're not allowing them to move on with their life because it's leaving so much uncertainty for them. If I'm not interested in pursuing it, I will just put it on myself and just say, look, I'm not in a great place. I need to focus on myself at the moment. And that way you just let them know because everyone can handle it. How does someone know when they're ready for dating? If someone's thinking about diving into the singles market, downloading the apps, what steps should they be taking first to give themselves the best shot at success?
I do think that's bad. I think we need to step away from dating apps. I think it's time. I think really evaluating what your motivation is. Like if you're talking about being ready, I don't know if there's such a thing as being 100% ready. But I also think that testing your motivation, are you going on dates just so that you can forget about your ex? Are you going on dates as a way to move on before your ex does? Are you doing it to hurt them? Are you doing it as a distraction? And why do you want to start dating again or don't want to? Some people, go for long periods of time and they're too scared to be rejected again or don't, are worried that their ex will find out and then that will shut the door. So it goes both ways, but it's kind of why do you want to go back into dating? What do you think that you can offer at this point in your life? And what are you trying to receive? These are really important. What is your intention with it? So I think if you can answer those questions and if you can feel like you can handle some rejection and some of the chaos that comes from a dating app in the state that you're in, great. But if you feel like you're so fragile that things like that might negatively impact your self-esteem or hurt you further before you've healed, then, you might want to take a beat. Sometimes you think you're ready and you go on a date and you're like, nope, was not ready. And then sometimes you won't think you're ready 100% and you'll go on a date and be like, oh my God, this was good for me. This was a good. So I think regardless of what you think, at some point you might just have to test out your theory. And, maybe you'll be like, I'm ready to date. And for 3 months, you'll be actively dating. You'll be like, you know what? Actually, that was taxing. I'm no longer in that space. And so then you take time off. So keep reevaluating your your openness and alignment with dating. And I think it's like a constant process of like reassessing, like, am I in the right space? Am I not?
Yeah, it's sometimes dating is an exercise in just seeing where you're at personally as well. Sometimes you don't actually know until you get out there, meet somebody else, and it shines a bit of a mirror on where you're at the moment. I love this ideal world that we don't need dating apps, Sarah, but where else can people find potential dates?
You know what should exist? You know how we have like pub crawl? Yeah, yeah. Pub crawl tour guides. We should do like activities for singles tour guides. Like, I think that could really take off. But like, you know, do activities and like go to your gym. I've met so many of my friends at the gym. I met a lot of friends at coffee shops and gyms and like random settings. And I know it's not the same as like dating, but at the same time, it's like putting yourself out there and actually doing activities. So don't go home and sit on Netflix and scroll through an app, but be like, I'm going to sign up for a pottery class. I'm going to go do morning serves. I'm going to I don't know, sit in a coffee shop with a book and on my phone and then strike up a conversation with someone. And so it is uncomfortable. It does take like skill, but also find people in areas that you have actual interest in. So like if you hate clubbing, maybe don't find your future boyfriend in a club. But if like you love books and you're in like a coffee shop or a bookshop and you see someone cute, approach them. And so it's like finding people in spaces that actually reflect you and then having, you know, the nerve and the courage to approach people. But I do still think it's possible to do that.
If you are somebody who lives a really active lifestyle, you might love swimming and running. Don't go out to try and meet someone at the club because there's a good chance they're probably not going to be aligned with those interests. When you were writing your book, which environments did you feel like were best suited for writing?
It really depends what phase. Like, was I putting things on paper for the first time? Or was I editing? Was I reworking things? I work very well under pressure. So this is my best work was done under the gun of like, this needs to be submitted now. And I then can literally be anywhere. Like I remember right before submitting the final copy of the manuscript, like before it goes through the senior editor and the copy editor, I had to read the whole book out loud. That's what they recommended. Is to read the entire book out loud and you will hear things that just don't work or you will restructure. And that happened. And I was working with a friend. And so we read my entire book and we had like 3 days to do it. And she was really sweet and she read it with me. And we literally would like be in a park reading, but because we had so little time, we were like in a coffee shop reading. We were on a plane flying to Venice reading this thing like in a hushed voice to each other. And that's just such a special like experience. But I literally like, it was such a productive 3 days. And I have like videos and pictures of me because at that time we were like mid travel, being in like 3 different countries, like at a ferry terminal, on a boat, on a plane, on a bus, just like reading this manuscript. And it was really kind of special and cool, but it just goes to show that it really, the setting doesn't matter. It's the mindset that matters. And I think that's something that's been true for me over and over again.
It always sounds like a little film and you guys are reading the book and then around you, the themes of the book are happening or something. That's very, very sweet. And can you give us an idea of the general themes of the book or what we can expect?
Yeah. So the book introduces the concept of self-loss. And I don't think it's something that's talked about enough, but it's a concept of not knowing who you are. And I think authenticity has been watered down, overused, and misused as a concept. And it is an existential concept. And so I use philosophy and psychology to kind of root us back into what these concepts actually mean and try to explore what is self-loss, why is it so painful, how to recognize it within yourself if that is what's happening for you. And then obviously helping the reader answer the 2 questions of who am I and why am I here as they read the book. So it's partly autobiographical, there's stories, but it's also pretty hands-on and hopefully informative and helpful in a way that people will walk away being like, okay, I now know how to approach life in a productive way. I now what kind of questions to ask and kind of how to construct my own answers to these questions.
So not only will it provide the philosophy, but it also gives the reader practical takeaways to actually apply those things. Ultimately, it's up to them to choose how to digest it and what to do with it.
Oh my God, yes. And actually, a big theme that I am nervous about and excited about is the theme of responsibility throughout the entire book. And obviously, the book is called It's on Me, aka responsibility. And so I think because I talk about the power and the empowerment and the liberation of responsibility that you need to take towards your life to make it a fulfilling and meaningful one, I also hope that that will apply to them actually reading it. And the book is not typically prescriptive in terms of, I'm not saying like, here are 5 steps to become authentic. It's not, because it's not that simple. And so I'm also, making the reader work for it a little bit and take responsibility for the way that they choose to approach their own authenticity. Of course, I give practical suggestions, but I really, really try to honor them and have confidence in them that they will do what works for them. I do not want to impose my own understanding of authenticity or my fulfilled sense of life on anyone else.
I can't wait to get my hands on this book. Are you going to be doing a crazy book tour to launch this thing?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what that looks like. Obviously now that's something that we're working on. I'm super excited because it comes out in Australia. And I will definitely be there a couple weeks after the book is out. So hopefully I'll get to do some really fun events in Australia as well. I would love to do that in Sydney. That would be very special.
To tie it back to the theme of this podcast, you really seems like you are stepping into the highest version of yourself. When you have a break to think about what you're doing, is it a little bit surreal that you're about to go to the States to launch your book? When you do take a step back, how do you feel?
To be honest, like I feel incredibly privileged and blessed to have this opportunity and to have this book come out and be accessible to the world. It's wild. But it feels so right in terms of like the manifestation concept and just doing what I'm so happy feels right, because I've been pushing in this direction for so long and I've been working very hard, and I would be so sad if I achieved a milestone and that didn't feel like the highest version of myself, or that didn't feel quite right. Then I would have known I kind of wasted my time. And, that does happen to us sometimes. But this feels like it was meant to be, and it feels very right. It feels very authentic. Nothing about this feels forced. But at the same time, it still feels pretty surreal that I have this opportunity and this platform and this voice to do the work that gives me so much genuine joy. I think the reason I work so much, which, is also a little bit of a problem, is because I derive so much meaning and joy from my work that I don't feel the need to do anything else. And that is not great. And I'm really trying to change that. But it makes me happy.
Many people might not know who that person is, what their purpose is, or they might be struggling to find some meaning in life. And what advice would you offer to your clients or people you come across if they're really trying to find meaning in their life?
I think the one misconception we have about meaning is that it's this like one big thing that then dictates your life. And I am not a huge believer that you find meaning. I'm a huge believer that you create meaning. And I think it's about the micro steps. It's about every day asking, what is life asking of me, or what brings me meaning today? And in the end, you're going to construct a life of meaning. The second point, I suppose, would be that meaning changes. So many of us are like, I think this is my meaning in life. And then they live 50 years doing this thing, even though maybe 20 years in, they were like, okay, this is no longer fulfilling. This no longer aligns. This no longer allows me to live out my values, but they still do it because they had a strong conviction, maybe when they were in their early 20s, that this was their meaning. And so I tell people, as you change, your meaning will probably change too. And that's okay. We don't need to have a set meaning for our lives forever. And so just being really open to adjusting and editing and changing what brings you meaning, how you want to create meaning, is important.
You mentioned manifesting. Does manifesting come into it for you? Are you designing your life in that way where you're imagining things you'd like to do and then making them happen? Talk to me about a manifestation process if you have one.
Yeah, I never thought I did. And then a couple months ago, I was like, oh my God, I manifest all the time. I guess, I think of like traditional ways people manifest, or like they write things out, or they have mantras, or they like act out certain things. And I always used to be like, I don't really do this. I was like, there's something there, but it's not hitting, it's not resonating. And then I had this thing that to process anything, or I do this almost once a day as a way to kind of ground. I love going for long walks or runs. And I will put on music, and that's my time. Like, even if a friend's coming with me, you're not allowed to talk to me. Like, do not talk to me. This is Sara time. It's like sacred time. And what I realized that I was doing during these runs or walks was imagining different scenarios, imagining what I wanted my life to be like, and which is manifestation. And I would play out different scenarios, and they were very specific about, different goals. And looking back now, I've achieved all these goals that I have manifested or imagined or played out in my head. And if you think about me doing this almost on a daily basis, sometimes, I'll be manifesting or thinking about a specific thing for like 365 days. That's a very, very long time. And the cool thing about it is the more you imagine it, the more likely you're to take the steps necessary to achieve that. Your decisions will just automatically become more aligned with that. And you won't feel as uncomfortable or weird about it because you've lived through this scenario so many times that now you feel like you just belong there in something that belongs to you. And so I realized recently that what I was doing was manifesting. And the cool thing is I don't manifest when I'm stationary. I do it when my body's moving. And there's a really cool embodiment component combined with manifestation. It's like you're actually living through the actions and your body's actively moving as you're doing it. And so that's been really cool for me to observe and kind of dabble in lately.
You can't just write things down or put them on a vision board and expect them to come true. It takes action.
Yeah, you can't it won't fall into your lap. But all manifestation does, I think, is prep you to take those actions, makes it more likely you'll take the necessary actions.
You've got a stressful job. You've got a lot of projects going on. Sometimes we don't get the balance right. We're on our screens for our job, and that screen has been designed to be extremely addictive. So do you have any tools in your toolkit when you don't get the balance right and you kind of need to recenter?
My balance, I talk about this on Instagram lately. My balance has been so bad, and I'm trying really hard. One is boundaries. Just set boundaries. Treat yourself like a little child sometimes that doesn't know when it's enough. And that's okay. So set boundaries. Also find something equally thrilling and meaningful. For me, that's the thing where I like it so much that it's difficult. And so I think it's important for me to find things I enjoy outside of work that give me a sense of meaning and fulfillment. It's not just about doing hobbies because you learned you should do hobbies, or like take time off for the sake of taking time off. I think it's really just making sure you have a life outside of work. So that's really important. And self-care, I think for me, is less about doing nice things, although that's great. And it's more about doing the hard things. So having those difficult conversations so that you're not stressed about it for days on end, resolving conflict, setting those boundaries, not postponing certain things. And that's like the best way I've shown myself love, was like really showing up and just doing the things that I need and fulfilling my actual needs. And then, a nice face mask or two is not bad.
A good face mask will always do the trick. Now, I end each episode by asking my guests the same question, which is, who are you becoming? I'd love to hear about the highest version of Sara that you aspire to become each day.
My automatic answer, so I'll just share with you, who am I becoming? I'm becoming whoever I want to become. Not like, whoever ends up happening. Not in that way. It's like, in this moment, the version that I'm intentional about, that's the version that I will become. And who I want to be might change over time, because I think that authenticity and identity is fluid. And so I feel so empowered to be like, I have every freedom to become whoever I want to become. And so that's who I'm going to become, whoever I want to become in that moment. And that's a bit of a cyclical answer, but I'm just going to have fun with it. And my highest version, I think, is just a version that feels right. I don't think that there is like a checklist or that perfect like ideal I'm trying to embody, because I don't think that exists, and that's so limiting. And so I'm trying to have a lot of fun with this becoming process.
Sara, thank you for the incredible value you provide every day. It's so cool to see you living in your potential, and I cannot wait to get my hands on your book. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Nick.